Gucci, Gucci 2 times, say it 2 times. Gucci, Gucci 2 times, say it 2 times. Gucci, Gucci 2 times.
Thanks for coming out. I'm just kind of curious. I know you mentioned the ICE speaker who came in and got protested out, but
Yes.
what's your particular stance on the way we handle undocumented immigrants in this country? Because I'm aware that they aren't U.S. citizens, they don't have constitutional rights, but they are still people, and we should treat them with respect, and they have human dignity. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so let me start from this premise. My view on immigration is almost entirely libertarian if there were no welfare state. So my view on immigration is that free flow of labor is a good thing, but there are two mitigating factors. Mitigating factor number one is you can't come here to take advantage of the welfare systems, and mitigating factor number two is you have to accept the culture of the United States, which is to say the rights that are expressed in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which means a small government not guaranteeing bigger services through redistribution of income. But you know, that we don't have to, people come here to work, we don't have to give them the vote either. I mean, as long as you're coming here and not committing a crime and you just want to work, I don't really see that as being a particularly big problem. As far as people who are undocumented and violating the law to be here, the biggest problem as I see it is, again, twofold. One is taking advantage of the welfare system, and there is a net cost for people who are coming here illegally because they take advantage of the education system, for example. They take advantage of state systems. It's still forbidden to get federal welfare, but there are state systems in California where I live. There are tremendous state support systems for undocumented immigrants, illegal immigrants. And so here's my view. The government has every right to decide who comes in the country and who doesn't come into the country. That is true for new immigrants, it's true for people who are already here. If you come here and we feel that you're a net benefit to the citizens of the United States, you're coming in here and you are going to work hard and fly right, and you're going to be a great addition to the United States, you respect our view of human nature and of government, and you just want to be part of this great mission, then more power to you, come on in. The same thing holds true for undocumented immigrants. Just because you've been here for 10 years, if you've been relying on welfare, then I think you ought to go. If you are not a net benefit to the United States, you ought to go. A citizenry gets to say who gets to join and who doesn't get to join. And you know, if that means that there's a father and a mother, and the father is a bad addition, but the mother is a good addition, then they're going to have to make a family decision as to where they live, just like we would have to in any other family situation. But it seems weird to me that the government can go through 150 million tax forms every year, but the government doesn't have the power to go through 11 million applications from illegal immigrants, interview people, and decide who's going to add to the country economically and culturally and who's going to detract. So in other words, do it on an individual level. The big problem is that you have people on both sides who don't want to do it on an individual level. They want to say, okay, all illegal, I don't use undocumented because that's a euphemism, all illegal immigrants out. Okay, I think that that's silly. There are people who are illegal immigrants who have been here working hard and doing the right things, but there are lots of people who haven't. And people on the left who say everybody should stay because they've been here and they're just like us. Well, not everybody is just like us, and we should take that into account.
My question was more or less, what is the reason why there's such a disproportionate amount of single mothers in the African-American poverty, like in that realm of?
Because, okay, so the real reason that there's a lot of single motherhood in the black community is because single motherhood has increased tremendously across all communities. So it used to be that in 1960, 5% of white women were single mothers. Today it's 40% of white women. So all across, it's increased. Single motherhood in the black community has been a bigger problem than in the white community because, yes, of pathologies of slavery. That goes all the way back to, you know, back in slave times, the rate of single motherhood was really high because of forcible separation of families, and that carried over into Jim Crow as well, although it was beginning to decline actually in the 1950s, in the 1940s and the 1950s. With the explosion of welfare, which was directly targeted at low-income communities, which happened to be disproportionately minority, now there was an actual economic incentive to continue in pathologies of single motherhood. That if you were thinking about getting married before you had the baby, now maybe you didn't think quite as hard about it because after all the government was there to pick you up. And so the single motherhood rate continues to rise at a very high rate, but it's rising similarly at a high rate in the white community too. So I don't want to pretend it's solely a black problem, single motherhood. It isn't. There's a very high single motherhood rate in the black community, high rate in the white community, high rate in the Hispanic community. That's mainly because of the sexual revolution and the ideas from the left that a child doesn't need a mother and a father, and that there's some sort of inherent virtue that attends to being a single mother, which is really an irritating thing. There's a lot more virtue that attends to being a responsible mother, marrying dad, and then there being two parents there to help raise the kid. It's a source of never-ending annoyance to me that the way the popular culture treats disparate situations is that my wife, who's responsible enough to get married, wait a few years, have a job, have kids, that in the heroism pantheon, she is secondary to the girl who decided to get pregnant out of wedlock at 19 and live in poverty. Like that just doesn't make any sense. Good decisions should be rewarded by society. those mistakes cannot be unmade by society just by handing people checks, because all that does is prolong the pathology. So what you really do have to do is help. As you have to have family members that help you out, you have to have a social network that helps you out, and that's going to be rebuilt over a course of time. There's no immediate solution. I'm not going to pretend that I have an immediate turnkey solution for a single mom who made a lot of mistakes, is living in poverty, and now I'm going to turn her into a millionaire overnight. I can't do that. The government can't do that. No one can do that. The government can't take my money and give it to her and make her wealthy. The government can't take your money and give it to her and make her responsible. Okay, the fact is that individual decisions matter.
Okay, hey Ben, my name's Andrew. And since DACA's been making a huge headlines throughout the whole nation, what do you think should we do now? Should have been repelled? Should they have made it something else better? Or should we continue having DACA?
I'm sorry, what was the
DACA.
Oh, DACA. Okay, so first of all, my position on immigration is I'm actually very libertarian on immigration, except for two factors. One is government payments that go to illegal immigrants, and the second is the cultural assimilation issue for people who come across the border illegally and aren't willing to assimilate into traditional American culture. Right, so these are two serious concerns. I'm not as concerned with the economics of illegal immigration in the sense that people who say we have to restrict our labor force in order to maintain a certain wage base, I don't think that's correct, because this is why you see companies that actually offshore and outsource, because they're looking for cheaper labor. It's always bewildering to me when conservatives say, well, we have to maintain a wage base by restricting the labor supply. Then why aren't you for raising the minimum wage? That does exactly the same thing. It restricts the labor supply and raises the wage base. So as far as DACA goes, my view on DACA is that people who are here illegally, whether they were born here or whether they were brought here as small children or not, should be assessed on a one-by-one judgment. So I am not in favor of the blanket swath amnesty for millions of people based on how long they've been here. I'm in favor of looking at people one-on-one and saying, okay, this person's in college and looks like they're going to have a career and hasn't been taking welfare dollars. This person looks like they're a good American, or they want to be a good American. Put them in the back of the line on a pathway to legalization. But if you're here, you've taken welfare dollars, you're not going to school, you're not bettering yourself, you're not going to be a productive part of American society, you haven't imbibed basic American cultural hallmarks, you do that, you should go. I have the exact same standard for people who are currently here illegally as the people who want to enter legally. I have the same exact standard, except if you're here illegally, you go to the back of the line, you wait behind the people who came here legally.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for answering the question. Special shout out to my friend Corey.
Hi, Ben.
Howdy.
Howdy. I want, my question, it's a little bit hard to articulate for me, so please just bear for like a minute. I wanted to ask you about the recent politically polarizing tendencies of the media and a way out. So I identify two problems in particular. It seems the American news media has evolved to I guess, promote sensationalism and intolerance toward other political views. I feel that this leads to a dangerous tendency for people to just choose their own media outlets in order to confirm their own biases. I hope you agree that this occurs with respect to all political affiliations. A little bit closer, maybe. Thanks. The other problem deals with fake news. Obviously, a term that's become like super nebulous. It's thrown around a great deal. But specifically with fake news, there are a lot of news websites that of dubious quality, and we hear stories how other countries or companies have used Facebook advertisements, for example, to promote to promote certain websites and sway easily impressionable opinions. So it's clear that Americans need, I guess everybody needs a basic basic access of reliable information. We need to have a reliable news media that informs the public. But it seems by default, Americans will seek out information that they find palatable. But this leads to me to believe that it should be the burden of the news media to be reliable and not, I guess, vitriolic. So like in the past, we've had something I think was called the Fairness Doctrine that was repealed like a few decades ago that required required outlets to present certain views. But obviously government regulation towards media and information, that's a slippery slope. What's the way out? What do you think the way out is?
I think the way out is a more informed population, unfortunately, right? I think that the idea that the government should never be regulating speech or access to it. Once the government does that, then you're wandering into very dicey, quasi-fascistic territory. When it comes to consumers of media, look, the media are just going to provide you what you want to read. Okay, the media are going to provide you what you want to click on. And yes, I would say this, I think most of the people in the media, yes, even including the left-leaning media, do want to tell the truth. I think a lot of them don't recognize their own biases. You know, look, I'm conservative. That means the way that I cover the news is going to be from a conservative angle. I try to separate myself enough to say, okay, here's the facts and then here's my opinion. But everything that I say is coming from that point of view. I think one of the big problems in media is people don't do that, right? Like George Stephanopoulos tries to pretend he's an objective news source. Right? That doesn't mean everything he says is false, but it does mean that everything he says is coming from the former campaign spokesperson for Bill Clinton. And that should have an impact. So that means it's up to us to look at a variety of news sources. I recommend this all the time, right? Don't just listen to my podcast, go listen to Pod Save America. Don't just read Daily Wire, go over and check out Huffington Post. Make sure that you're reading a variety of news sources. If you actually want to tell what the facts are, the best way to do it is to read two opposing websites or two opposing outlets and think of them as lines that intersect at one point, and the point at which they intersect is the factual point. And whatever those two stories have in common, you can take that as probably the grain of truth in the story.
Am I allowed a brief follow-up? Okay. So I guess I understand your emphasis on self-reliance, but evidently, to the extent that you believe that one believes in the efficiency of free markets, evidently people tend to move to confirm their own biases, and that's not occurring.
Well, I mean, I think that's why the founders relied on the idea that we were going to have a civically educated public. I mean, in the end, you're going to have to trust the people one way or another. I don't trust the government to regulate what the people see. I trust the government less to regulate what the people see than I do the people to educate themselves. And this one falls under the heading of, as Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst system except for all the others. Right? Unfortunately, there's no way out of this box. People are going to have to inform themselves better. And yes, of course, people have a tendency toward confirmation bias. But that's why it's your job, if you know about confirmation bias, to suggest to people that maybe they should stop.